The officer ended up refusing the application. Cases have gone to court, judicial review, because IRCC officers were confused. PGWPs are probably going to be one of the simplest applications you'll ever make, but it's also one of the applications that have the biggest implications in your applications. So the majority of students that come to us are people that have experienced PGWP refusals, and if we're not able to help them in time, then it can actually lead to you having to leave Canada. One of the top reasons for refusals for PGWPs is that your study permit actually becomes invalid 90 days after you complete your studies. And so when you complete your studies and you have a study permit that's valid for more than 3 months, you just wait until the expiry date because you think you're eligible. But at the end of the day, you submit the application, it comes back refused because you were actually out of status. Another one is if you end up, working after you complete your studies and have received your letter of completion. That can lead to problems because the day that you receive your letter of completion is the day that you have to stop working. But if you continue working, that's non-compliance with your conditions of a study permit, and that can and usually does lead to refusals unless you properly prepare a comprehensive application. Another one is that you've worked more than the authorized amount during the time of your studies. So as you know, students can work up to 20 hours per week off campus. On campus, you can work full time. And then there's a lot of public policies that have been allowing students to work, on campus or off campus, but it can get confusing. And if you end up not following the compliance of your study permit, then that will end up causing problems for you in the future. A fourth one is that you ended up studying part-time in more than one academic session. And so what that means is usually you're allowed to work part-time you're allowed to study part-time at the last semester because you only have 1 or 2 courses left to finish the course. However, you're not allowed to study part-time in the middle of these, academic sessions, or else that would make you no longer eligible for the post-graduation work permit. Say that you had a gap in your studies. You're actually not allowed to have a gap in your studies, let's say like a gap semester or taking time off, unless it's authorized by the designated learning institute that you're studying at. So if you ended up taking time off and you don't have authorization, your application likely will be refused for that reason. But if you do have authorized leave from the school for, let's say, medical reasons or for other reasons that the school deems necessary, then you can submit evidence that the school has given you authorization to take leave and your application shouldn't be impacted. But if you don't include letters of explanation and the supporting evidence, it can come back refused. IRCC officers are known to make mistakes sometimes because applications at the end of the day are reviewed by people, even though there's, automations that help officers make these decisions. And so even as immigration consultants that prepare comprehensive applications, we've had applications come back refused for reasons that make no sense. Let's say an individual meets the requirement, but they refuse it for that same requirement. And so in cases like this, reconsideration requests, reapplying, judicial review are options for students. But at the end of the day, we need to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
With regards to being a student, what's the definition of a semester?
So a semester or an academic session is normally a definition that the school comes up with. And so when you're taking a look at the requirements for IRCC, you really need to take a look into what are the definitions used by the school, and then you need to provide those definitions to IRCC for them to understand. There have been cases in the past where, cases have gone to court, judicial review, because IRCC officers were confused at how the school was talking about semesters. For example, they, in one academic year semester, they didn't split it into 2 semesters that were mandatory for the student. It was 1. And so during one of these, semesters inside the academic year, they studied part-time. However, because the definition from the school was 1 semester was actually the entire academic year, the officer ended up refusing the application, saying that normally academic sessions are, 4 months long, but at this school it was 8 months long or a year. That ended up going to judicial review, and the judge did end up sending it back for a reevaluation by another officer. But these are things that you do need to worry about when you are submitting an application, because it can cause problems for you.
Any helpful tips when collecting documentation, maybe preparing for a submission?
Yeah, I mean, when you're preparing documentation, I think the key thing is just to understand what are the document requirements. PGWP applications tend to be small in nature. It's just important to understand what are the real requirements of the program and making sure you have, a proper letter of completion, your transcripts. It doesn't need to be official. Unofficial is fine. And if you have your degrees or certificates by the time that you apply, including all evidence that points to you having completed your studies, is important to provide.
So is there a way to assess all of this?
Yeah, so there's definitely a way to assess this. And, it's very confusing sometimes when you take a look at 20 lists of eligibility requirements for PGWPs and, officer operational guidelines and manuals. And so what we've created at PGWPcanada.com is an automated way for you to answer questions based on your situation. And it provides you with a full assessment in a PDF format that shows what the requirements for the program are, what were your answers, and dependent on your answers, whether you're eligible or ineligible. And you can take a look back and see what the problem is. Is this something can I fix? Is this something that I need to talk to, PGWP Canada about? And by doing that, you'll be making sure that when you submit an application, you know exactly where you're standing. Assessment, it is completely free. You can go to pgwpcanada.com, create an account, answer questions, and it'll email you a copy of the assessment. If you require any further services, you need to talk to me specifically, or you'd like to, have us prepare your entire application, those are options. Those are paid options. But until the full assessment, everything is free for you. This assessment can be found at pgwpcanada.com or through the link that's below this video.